Okay, so Kesem 101. Our chapter was started in 2020, so it's pretty young. Last year we served 25 campers and had 15 counselors. During the school year, we hold friends and family days so that we get to interact with the kids during the school year and also meet the parents because the parents are ultimately the ones who sign up the kids for camp. So it's good to have a good channel of communication between us and them. At camp, we have traditions like camp songs and empowerment. So, for people who are new to Kesem, you may have heard empowerment before, but not really know what it means. So, empowerment is a time at camp in which all campers and counselors sit down together, share their experiences with cancer, parents' cancer, relatives, allowing everyone a safe space to share and help them understand that they aren't alone. Um, it is important to note how a parent's cancer can impact a child. It can create isolation from peers, lower academic performance, loss of social interest, or taking on adult roles in the household. All these are things that we should watch out for and help the kids navigate. So, when talking with the kids, it's important to only agree with what they've been told about their cancer or their parents' diagnosis. We should not be adding or amending anything because it isn't our place. We should be fostering an environment that encourages communication, confidence, and supporting for the kids. These are all huge contributors to providing a safe space at camp and helping the kids feel like they belong and can not only talk to us, but also each other. We have to remember that there are an infinite amount of family variations that the kids have. Three examples are that a parent currently has cancer, a parent does not have active cancer anymore and is in remission or is cancer free, or that a parent did have cancer and is unfortunately no longer with us. As a result, every child will react differently to having a parent or caregiver with cancer. You might not always know how to respond correctly to something a kid says, but as long as you hear them and express that you're listening, paying attention, and providing the support they need, it is okay. It is important to review Kesem's DEI initiatives. So, our mission at Kesem of supporting children through and beyond a parent's cancer, and our vision of ensuring that every child impacted by a parent's cancer is never alone, can only be realized through an ongoing, steadfast commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in every part of our organization. At camp, your responsibilities will include ensuring that our commitment to DEI is represented at camp, as you guys are crucial parts of ensuring that camp is a space where everyone feels safe, loved, and respected. Since we're working in an environment where cancer is a pretty key point, it's important to go over some related points. But before we do that, um, you guys can just choose one of these questions and you can either unmute or type in the chat. So, like, what terms do you think campers might use when talking about cancer? Or what are some myths about cancer that the campers at camp may believe? So you can take a second and then, yeah. Yeah, remission and chemo. So even though some of these kids are pretty young, some of them are going to be aware of like the treatments that their parents are going to be going through, maybe some of the tests that they're going through. They might also use incorrect wording or maybe harsh wording when talking about cancer because they might have pain related to it. So even if they use incorrect terms, it's either best to gently correct them or again go with what they've been told about their situation. So going into like some terms, for starters, there are basic terms related to cancer, the word cancer, benign, malignant, tumor, and metastasis. So benign is not cancerous. Cancer itself is an abnormal, uncontrolled growth of cells of any organ in the body. Cancer is not one disease, but over 100 different diseases. Malignant is just another term for cancer. Tumor is an abnormal mass of tissue. Tumors may be benign or malignant. And metastasis is the spread of cancer from one part of the body to another. Again, these are all terms that campers may or may not know. Within the fields of pathology, there's stage, grade, and margins. So the extent of cancer in the body is like stage, it's stage 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's based on the size of the tumor and whether it has spread. Grade has to do with how abnormal cancer cells look under a microscope and how quickly the tumor is likely to grow and spread. High grade tumors tend to be more aggressive than low grade tumors. And then margins have to do with when a tumor is removed from the body, it's examined to determine if the borders of the tumor are cancer free. If there are cancer cells on the border, more surgery may be required. There's a bunch of different tests that people use to test for cancer or diagnose cancer. So there are CT scans, MRIs, PET scans, ultrasounds and sonograms, and tumor markers. So CT scans deal with a series of X-rays that are combined by a computer into images of the bones and soft tissues in your body. CT scans provide much more information than just one single X-ray. MRIs also an imaging device, but it's especially useful when viewing the brain, spine, soft tissue of joints, and some other parts of the body. PET scans look at the structures of the body instead of softer tissues and stuff like that. They look for cancerous activity. So cancer cells often light up on a PET scan because they metabolize glucose differently than normal cells do. PET scans are often used to see if cancer has spread to other parts of the body. Ultrasounds and sonograms are tests that use sound waves to identify tumors and other structures within the body. And tumor markers are blood tests that might indicate the presence of certain cancers in the body. So not all types of cancers have tumor markers though. Again, there's multiple different types of treatment plans that people can use when dealing with cancer. So there's chemotherapy, radiation therapy, hormone therapy, targeted therapies, first line treatment, and second line treatment. Chemotherapy is treatment with drugs that kill cancer cells. Radiation therapy is the use of radiation from X-rays and other sources to kill cancer cells and shrink tumors in the body. Hormone therapy uses treatment that blocks or removes adding hormones to slow or stop the growth of certain cancers. Targeted therapies are related to newer drugs that specifically treat target cancer cells while doing minimal damage to normal cells. First line treatment is the initial treatment that is used to treat a patient's cancer. And second line treatment is a treatment that is started when the first line treatment stops being effective. So once again, we have a frequently asked questions slide at the end of this presentation. You can look at it later, or you can look at it now. And then we're going to move on to the second presentation for today. The second presentation today deals with basic childcare. So this is just like about assessing and meeting the needs of children in your care. We might not always be able to predict and plan for every scenario or need that may arise at camp, but we can at least examine how to assess children's needs and meet those needs. So first question of this presentation is, how do you express when you're hungry, tired, frustrated, or nervous? And then again, you can answer by unmuting or just typing in the chat. So typically, yeah, so letting people know is like really common. You might be tired and just like express, "Oh my gosh, I'm so tired." Um, or it might be more of a visible thing if you're frustrated or angry. Nervousness can also be seen with like fidgeting. Um, so now that you guys have kind of thought about that, how do you think a 6-year-old camper would express the same needs? This would definitely include or could include crying, not participating in activities, refusing to eat lunch, refusing to shower, falling asleep at activities, lashing out, or not listening. These responses aren't just 6-year-old specific either. These could be any age group because our campers come from a variety of different backgrounds, are different ages, have different levels of familiarity with our space and our program, and ultimately not in control of their space at camp. For this reason, their needs must be communicated or maybe communicated by behaviors rather than just straightforward expressions of what they might need. So it's our job to identify when a camper has a need, meet that need, and communicate with compassion and empathy. So when identifying campers' needs, there's like 8 main strategies. Um, so prior to camp, each unit's going to receive information about the campers in their unit from the campers' guardians. Sometimes this information is going to indicate different behaviors, needs, or information about the camper, but in some cases it might not actually be too helpful, depending on the level of detail or information. So these basic strategies are extremely helpful in identifying camper behavior and assessing for needs. So the first one is just being prepared, utilizing the information that you have to prepare yourself before camp, utilizing the information you learn on the camper orientation call combined with an application review of the camper in your unit and pre-camp calls by counselors to have a better understanding of what you may look out for at camp. Paying attention is also a big one. When a camper's behavior seems off, pay attention. You might not always pick up on something that needs your intervention, but awareness is always our greatest tool in identifying camper needs. Pay attention to how campers in your unit act when they're happy or when their needs are met. And if they deviate from this space, pay attention to how they are acting, who they are interacting with, and what they have done throughout the day. So, looking for clues as to what the camper might need. Also, even something as simple as just asking questions. So, when you have identified that something might be going on, just ask the camper about it. You may have to tailor your approach based on the age of the camper. So, younger campers might need more open-ended questions, feelings-based questions, because they might not know how to express themselves right away. While older campers may not want to talk about how they're feeling in front of a group of their own peers. So, reading the room and making sure that you are always asking supportive and empathetic questions and not being afraid to explain why you were asking if maybe they're frustrated and ask you, like, why are you even asking me this? Um, so, being patient is kind of ties into that last point. So, sometimes it may take a little bit of time to identify what the camper in question needs, and that's going to be completely okay. Be patient and continue to ask questions if you think that there may be something that needs to be addressed. Offer support and encouragement to the camper if they seem uncomfortable with sharing and it might help them come out of their shell. Um, so being compassionate and empathetic, being in a new environment is difficult for anyone. So while at camp, many campers may not know where they will do very basic things like showering, sleeping, and eating meals. And that can be really stressful. So, creating a space where campers feel like you are truly listening and empathizing with their needs is important. And creating this connection can take time, so don't rush through a camper's feelings to get to a solution. Being open to new information is also really important. Some of the unit leaders or counselors, even admin, may already know some campers from Kesem. Um, but even if you think you know them, understand that a lot of things can happen throughout the year and sometimes the ways that children express themselves changes as they grow. So being open to new information and new expressions throughout the week is really important. So this is also just checking your bias at the door. No one camper, child, or person expresses things in the same way, and we need to be open to supporting and expressing needs of our campers, regardless of how they are expressing those needs or how familiar we are with them. Using environmental clues is also really important. So thinking about the environment itself, what time of the day is it? Maybe it's more so around a meal time, so they're hungry. What activities are coming up, or did you just do? Maybe this is why they're tired. Um, it is possible that the schedule can clue you into anything a camper needs. And then lastly, just trusting your gut. At the end of the day, if you're concerned about a camper or feel they might need something, just trust your gut. We are these campers' parents for the week, so it is better safe than sorry when identifying and checking in on their needs. So after going through those strategies, we're gonna go through a really quick scenario. So say that you notice that a camper in your unit has not touched their food at lunch. So you walk up to the camper and ask them why they haven't eaten yet. The camper expresses that they don't like any of the food at camp and haven't eaten for the last 2 meals. What would you do? Again, you can just answer by unmuting or typing in the chat. You can take a second. Okay, well, some potential answers might include, yeah, asking what they don't like about the food is a really big one. So this relates to like how they're feeling eating at lunch specifically. While maybe they do genuinely dislike the food, it is possible that not eating is a communication of an emotional feeling that they are having, like homesickness or sadness. So knowing how the camper is feeling will help you best support them. Also, making sure that the camper isn't feeling physically sick, because sometimes avoiding food could be a sign of illness. Um, Ultimately, the camper must feed themselves. We can't force them to eat, and it is our responsibility to make sure that they are doing so. If these tactics don't work, it's best to just communicate with maybe another counselor, another unit leader, even a member of admin, because maybe someone else has a technique that might work better than yours. Um, we will need to call home if a camper misses more than 2 meals in a row, though. So, when it comes to your camper's everyday needs, here are some common tasks that you may be in charge of at camp. Um, Ensuring proper hygiene, meal times, bedtimes, morning routines, getting dressed, remembering essential items for the day, handling instances of bedwetting, and keeping children from running away from groups during transitions. These are all really important, and keeping the kids engaged and checking in on how they're doing, because sometimes transitions can throw them off or be unexpected. And being in an unfamiliar environment can be very jarring to some people. So it's good to check in on kids constantly and make sure they're doing all right and that all of their needs are being met. So unless anyone has any questions, that's it for the second presentation. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Hi guys, thank you for coming. So we have 2 more slides, but like I promise they won't take that long. Okay, so the first one is this. Ellie, can you please allow me to share my screen? Thank you. Okay. Um, Okay, so what is our commitment? So our Kesem commitment basically is to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so Kesem's mission of supporting children through and beyond a parent's cancer and our vision of ensuring that every child impacted by a parent's cancer is never alone can only be realized through an ongoing, steadfast commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in every part of our organization. And so to that end, Kesem has the following commitments of continually expanding the communities we support and work with. So our camper families, volunteers, staff, alumni, partners, donors, boards. We also strive for equity in delivering a transformative, fun, and empowering community. We aspire to create shared spaces that are safe for every member of Kesem, and Kesem engages in continued meaningful learning so that we can support our mission and our Kesem community. So from what I kind of just read out, is there a specific thing that stands out to you as something like you can definitely commit to as a camp counselor, whether it be that you're a unit leader or cabin counselor? Like, what is something you can do that kind of hits on one of these DEI commitments? So you can just put it in the chat, and then we could keep going. Yeah. Okay, yeah, make sure everyone feels welcome, making sure it's a safe and shared space. Exactly. Yep, that's it. All right. So understanding the background is important as well. So we understand that these conversations could be uncomfortable in terms of like intersections of identity at camp. And some folks may have been on the receiving end of prejudiced remarks, microaggressions, and more. And so at camp, you are an extreme owner of keeping camp safe, respectful, and inclusive. And this means that when anything jeopardizes that, whether it be comments, behaviors, actions, etc., you need to step in. Across the country, there were 24 reported instances of prejudiced remarks, behaviors in the summer 2022. And at Kesem, our hope is that we can lead with our values, our honor code, and our commitments to DEI to minimize that number. So we basically have like some things that need to happen at like different points. So for example, we have immediate dismissal, which can possibly happen. And this would basically happen if any campers or staff members engage in any of the following, such as possession, display of threat, or use of drugs like vapes, e-cigarettes, alcohol, etc. Possession, display of, or threat or use of weapons, and threats to harm themselves or others, and this includes running away. We also have the one offense rule. And so if any campers do the following, they'll have a meeting with the camp advisor and MHP, guardians will be informed, and a behavior plan will be created. If additional comments, jokes, violence, or other actions take place, the camper will be sent home, unless otherwise approved by a hotline operator. Hotline operators reserve the right to decide an action deems an immediate dismissal, and these things are violent comments like threats towards anyone in camp programming, like campers, families, or other staff members, breaking the rule of three, negative comments or jokes regarding one's race, religion, ability, nationality, sexual orientation, family structure, socioeconomic status, etc., bullying comments and behavior, offensive language, violations of any Camp Kesem values. Oh, no. Okay, there. So let me here. Okay. So what do I do? How do I change my behavior in order to affect the cultural change in my chapter and in the kids that I'm responsible for as a counselor? So number one is lead by example. So leading by example means that you make statements, say, and choices, do, that are consistent with good ideas, positive values, and principled beliefs. It's also important that yeah, it's also important that you need to know where these kids are coming from. So not everyone of prejudice or bias is equal. There will be instances where the person who's causing them harm is unaware, ignorant as to how their actions or words can impact a certain group of people. And in these moments, it is important for staff to disrupt the harm and use it as an opportunity to educate our Kesem policies. It's also important to always be aware of bias-related behavior and belief in stereotypes. So once you've identified an instance where you might have caused harm to someone else based on their identity, take accountability and acknowledge that. Something that I kind of want to think about is what are some concrete ways that we can ensure that our camp environment is affirming and celebratory of identity and differences? You guys would just put like something in the chat, like pretty small. It doesn't have to be a full sentence or anything like that. So like, yeah, like what are some ways that we can ensure that our camp environment is basically like celebrating different identities, celebrating differences in background, stuff like that. Like you could just like write something in the chat, super small. Yep. So making sure everyone feels welcome, asking more about something that they bring up. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, and in terms of the idea of like the do, say, and believe, sometimes campers are more in tune with what being disrespectful looks like or what they should not be doing instead of what they should be doing. So that is just something to take into consideration. And any hate-based words or harmful language of any kind will not be tolerated in a custom space. So make the commitment now that if someone, a camper or counselor or professional staff member alike, makes a comment that is harmful in any way to someone else, especially based on their identity, that you will do something about it. Respond immediately in the moment, publicly acknowledge and call it that you do not support their behavior. Take the opportunity to teach the party who perpetrated the harm and support the parties who were affected by the harm, and use the framework of interrupt, explain, educate, affirm, and follow up. So this is kind of like the whole framework that we're going to be consistently using, and there's going to be scenarios in the next slideshow that we're going to have to like use these kind of words and steps to respond to these scenarios. So the first one, interrupt, is stopping the behavior from continuing. Explain, center your conversation about what we believe to be true at Kesem. Educate, use this as an opportunity to let the person know why their behavior is not acceptable. So educate them on the topic, show them what the correct behavior is. Affirm, validate, and prioritize the feelings of any person affected by said behaviors, and allow for them to decide how to move forward on their part. And follow up, loop in your unit leader, your camp advisor, document when necessary, and ensure camper knows the consequences. Um, And the big thing is that like campers are children and may require additional education as to why their behavior is harmful. So if you feel the need to or compelled to argue, yell, or debate a child, you're not in the right place to deal with this issue. Always make sure you're using a calm voice whenever you're using any of these steps to respond to a scenario, and ensure the immediate and long-term physical safety of all the campers, ensure the emotional safety of all the campers as well. Um, so yeah. Um, just like I guess some ideas for the steps that we're going to be discussing more in depth in the next slideshow. When we say kind of taking care of the camper who is impacted first, what that basically means is that like of course know that the hurt camper is allowed to feel hurt or angry, and they should be allowed to safely express these feelings to a counselor. So it's important that your understanding of these feelings instead of trying to ignore or change them. Also, it's important that the hurt camper can be respectful toward the other camper when you rejoin the group, but they don't have the responsibility to forgive the other camper. So like, don't force them to forgive each other if like there's still tension. Kind of just let it be, and it's just more important that they're able to both like respect each other for the time being, and that they're able to do the activities without causing too much halts for the other group, like the rest of the group. And the important thing also to remember is immediacy and follow up. So do every situation immediately, the first time it happens, and consistently, and speak to the importance of the issue. And in terms of following up also, whenever these kind of situations happen, it's important to report this to the camp advisor, who provides extra support and guidance. And it may not always seem obvious that you need to loop in the camp advisor, but just make sure to do so. I think it's better for you to do it more often than you need to than to not do it as often as you need to. And we talk a lot about how we're going to have these competitions with the campers, but oftentimes you may feel like you're either like disrespected or something happens during camp, like at camp, that is basically making you the target and was because of something that another staff member said. So in that particular situation, you can go to the camp advisor. And if the issue is with the camp advisor, you can go to the program coordinator. So just for you to know like where to go if something is to happen. So that is the end of the first slideshow, just introducing the steps of how we deal with scenarios. These are some frequently asked questions, and we're going to send the slideshow over in an email. We're now going to move on to the different scenarios. So our goals is to learn how to celebrate differences in a camp setting and understand how instances of prejudice can negatively impact a camper or counselor experience at camp. And we're going to figure out the framework and apply the framework of how to do this. So to start off, we're going to be doing some review of definitions. So microaggressions is the first one, and this is everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental sites, snubs or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to target persons based solely upon their marginalized group membership. Prejudice is an unjustified or incorrect attitude towards an individual based only on the individual's membership of a social group. And interruptions are a skill used to address microaggressions. The goal of an interruption is to encourage respectful communication, deconstruct isms and stereotypes, and educate and learn something together. So some guidelines for us to follow with this is that we need to separate the person from the action or behavior. So instead of saying you're racist, try saying that could be perceived as a racist remark. Always avoid starting questions with why. It puts people on the defensive. Instead, try how or what made you. And use I statements describing the impact on you instead or refer to the action indirectly. So when blank was said or when blank happened. So how you say it is as critical as what you say. So like the tone, voice, body language, all of that matters and can put kids on the defensive, which we don't want them to be on. So some common open-ended questions or phrases you can ask when responding to an instance of prejudice or microaggression are the following. This is kind of just a review of what that is. Oh, okay, I guess it's here, yeah. Inquire, so ask the speaker to elaborate. Paraphrase and reflecting on one's own words, the essence of what the speaker has said. Paraphrasing demonstrates understanding and reduces defensiveness of both you and the speaker. So ask like, okay, it sounds like you said this, or from what I understand, like that kind of response when they're telling you a story of what happened. Reframe, create a different way to look at the situation. So what would happen if, or let's reframe this. Use impact and I statements. So a clear and non-threatening way to directly address these issues is to focus on oneself rather than on the person. So I felt when you said or did the behavior, and it did like what kind of impact it had on you. And use preference statements. So what I would like is, or it'd be helpful to me if, also make sure to tailor your response to the developmental age of your audience. So for the younger children, don't use advanced words or phrases or acronyms that younger children just might not understand. For older campers, you can use more advanced words, phrases, or acronyms to make sure you have a shared definition among the group before continuing the conversation so that everyone's on the same boat on what you're trying to communicate. And for student leaders and staff, name the impact that their comment or statement had on others in the group. Reiterate that as student leaders, it is their responsibility to ensure that all members of the Kesem community feel safe. Okay, so we're now gonna go over the scenarios, and my hope is that for every scenario, you guys can just write like one sentence of how you would respond. It doesn't have to be like a big thing. I just want us to be thinking about the scenarios. It's really all it is. And then after scenarios, we're done. So there's not a lot left. So just a review of what are the steps to how we respond. So it's interrupt, explain, educate, affirm, and follow up. If you guys want, you guys can take a picture of this, or I'll stay on this slide as I read out the scenario, so it's easier to refer to them. Okay, so the first scenario is a camper or counselor makes a comparison between the experiences of a different racial groups. For example, someone says all lives matter. What would you do in that situation? Just like write something in the chat, like super small, doesn't have to be a big thing. Explain and educate that saying that may be hurtful to other campers, staff members, and affirm it someone felt hurt by it. Explain that camp isn't a place where we assert our opinions about these kinds of topics because it could make others uncomfortable or feel unsafe. So that can hurt with some people. Yeah. So basically, it's kind of just like, hey, it's really important that we ensure camp is a really safe and inclusive environment for everyone. And while your intention may be to say that everyone is important, no matter what race, religion, etc., it's a bit deeper than that. I'd like to share some information about the Black Lives Matter movement and why we don't say all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter or compare the experience that people of different races have in navigating the world. So it's kind of just like an example, but like you guys are kind of hitting on the same concepts. So the next scenario is a camper says that's gay when describing a game they're not enjoying. So yeah, it's kind of same thing. Like, how would you respond to that in like a sentence or a two in the chat, and then we'll go over. Be hurtful to some people. Explain how something like that can hurt people and should not be used as an insult. Yeah, exactly. So something we could respond is, yep, exactly. Is we could say language that is offensive or exclusive isn't allowed at Kesem. We want to keep all our campers safe. And that isn't safe language. There's possibility that no one has taught this camper that this phrase is harmful to the LGBTQIA2 plus community. We want to say something along the lines of at Kesem, we respect everyone's sexual identity, using a term that defines not what we using a term that defines someone's sexual identity as an insult is not what we want to represent. I'm not sure if you knew that this could be hurtful, so let's make sure to use our words carefully, include everyone. So another scenario is a neurotypical camper, camper A, says to their counselor that they don't understand why a camper on the spectrum, or camper B, gets special treatment and has their own schedule and attention. They say it's unfair. So how would you respond to this situation? So a neurotypical camper, camper A, says to their counselor that they don't understand why a camper on the spectrum, camper B, gets special treatment and has their own schedule and attention. They say it's unfair. Yeah, so educating them on the other campus situation without disclosing personal information, for sure. Educate them on how people need extra help sometimes, and it's not that we're favoring them, but simply helping them. Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. So basically saying like, camper A respond really well when I say, hey, we're leaving here in 5 minutes. You always get your stuff and are ready to go, and you don't need to know what's coming next. For other campers, when we say we're leaving in 5 minutes, they might feel stressed, rushed, or anxious. So we like to give them a schedule to ease any of those feelings that are coming up. Okay, so the next scenario is the camper shares a first-hand experience with racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, cissexism, and or other first-hand experience with prejudice. So like, what would you do in the situation if they're sharing it in like a cabin chat or something like that? How would you handle that? Yes, education on the situation they experienced was not all campers may be working struggles, interrupting, or any harmful comments, whether they're purposeful or accidental. Yes, exactly. So basically the idea is thank you for sharing with this group and trusting us with your story. I am so sorry that you had to go through that and that you carry that experience with you. Please know that if you want to share anything else with us now or in the future, we are here to listen and support you. So there's nothing like you shouldn't tell them like you don't need to educate them, you don't need to interrupt what happened. Just kind of saying like thank you for sharing this with us and encouraging them to share if anything happens, like them sharing it with you. Okay, so another scenario is a young camper makes a comment stating that they don't understand why another camper in their unit has certain pronouns. So how would you handle that situation? So explain the person wants to be addressed with those pronouns because it aligns with their identity. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So basically saying like our identities are so great because we get to be exactly who we are. You can say that just like the camper in a question has ways they would like to be addressed, their peers have ways that they would like to be addressed as well. And that's normal to have different pronouns from your peers and friends. And at Kesem, we expect our campers to use the pronouns that their peers share with them. So another scenario is you're walking outside of your cabin and you notice that an able-bodied camper is trying to play freeze tag. However, another camper who is in a wheelchair is not able to participate. How would you address this? Yeah, so interrupt the game while explaining that we should take into consideration everyone is playing the game and then find a new game where everyone can play. Yep, modifying the game so they can play, exactly. So basically, just making sure that oh, you might ask the camper in the wheelchair what they want to play. However, if this feels uncomfortable, you can recommend a game that doesn't require running or having two games at the same time or seeing if there are rules that can be added into freeze tag. Maybe someone can referee and the other can have fun, can add fun rules as the game goes along. So just making modifications so everyone can participate and be included. Another scenario is a young camper continuously mixes up the names of two Black counselors in your unit. How would you respond to this situation? So yeah, like our response could be kind of saying things like, "You may be the same race, but they don't look alike. Sure, you may be seeing a similarity. It's hard to remember all of these names, but we wanted to call each counselor by their name as it's a part of their identity." And yeah, just checking with the two counselors, making sure that they're comfortable and making sure that they're aware of the conversation that you've had with the camper. So another scenario is a camper shares that they participated in or support a social justice movement. And this is kind of like a simple one. There isn't really something that you would necessarily need to like interrupt or educate on. You basically just affirm. So say thank you for sharing, and your voice is really powerful, and I'm proud of you for speaking up for what you believe in. Um, the second to last scenario is a camper teasing another camper about being in a bigger body. Um, so yeah, how do we respond to this situation? Just like a sentence. So we can say things like at Kesem, we want everyone to feel good about themselves. We want don't tolerate negative or hurtful statements about our peers and their bodies. So yeah, like interrupt the behavior and explain that everyone on campus is welcomed. Interrupt and explain that body shaming isn't okay. Everyone is beautiful in their way, and we should never judge them exactly based on their looks. So this is the last scenario. You hear one camper say to another camper, why do the counselors give you clothes? What you can't afford your own? So there are some campers that we will help buy supplies for. We'll give them those supplies. So in that situation, how would you respond? So we want to say things like, it seems like you were trying to make this camper feel bad about getting some supplies from Petsam, and I want to make sure that you know that we don't tolerate any sort of negative attitude toward other people's socioeconomic status, meaning or how much money, sorry, no, status, meaning or how much money they have. Discuss with the camper who was hurt and ask them if they want to have a competition with the camper or would like to keep their distance. They get to decide how they'd like to move forward. And let the leader and camp advisor know and listen closely for more exclusive words and actions. And so basically overall, I want everyone to kind of know that at camp, the camp advisor should be looped in on any and all the situations that we just went over. And our first obligation is to the victim of a microaggression or prejudice comment. And before doing anything else, we should provide what the hurt camper needs. So in your EOTs, you will learn more about the policies and procedures that take place after the conversations. And we expect all of those tools to work in tandem with the framework that we just learned. And this is the frequently asked questions page, which